Tighten your lines as we get ready to sail the seven seas on the Political Pirate Podcast. Join Captain Ted Yoho and the salty dog, John Martin, as they search far and wide for the greatest treasure of all, the truth. From local Florida news to nationwide stories and the globe beyond, we've got it all mapped out. Now here's your hosts, the salty dog, John Martin, and Captain Ted Yoho.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 3Ps, the Political Pirate Podcast, with the old salty dog here, John Martin, and the captain of our pirate ship, back today, none other than Captain Ted Yoho. Good morning, Ted.
Good morning, John. It's great to be back, and look forward to a great show. It's not like we don't have anything to talk about, right?
Absolutely. Like we were saying before we went on the air, there's never a time not to have a topic, but the question is, what do you talk about? There's so many things. We only have an hour's time, and we got to try to fit it all in. It is chaotic, to say the least, out there in our country right now and world, and that kind of brings us to what we're going to talk about today.
There is, but there's also a lot of underlying things that all come back to a very basic point. I'll make that towards the end, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, the kind of overall question that I have today, Ted, is how far do we go? And there's multiple topics that can kind of fit under this. So in no particular order, although I think this one certainly has the ability to rise to the top, is what I call chaos in the streets. Because to me, no matter how you look at it, whether the protesters, the president, ICE, Border Patrol, all that, there's clearly chaos in the streets, and there's some blame to go around everywhere, but I don't think anybody can deny that we have chaos in the streets in places like Minneapolis right now.
No, it's all, I mean, you can look around America in the Democratic strongholds where we've seen a problem just to push back against ICE, and you look at Iran, but what's going on in Iran is also going over in China, it's going in the Middle East, it's going all over. I get a news feed from Pakistan and Iran, and it's just atrocious of what you're hearing. And these things go on all the time. Then you can throw in South America with the drug cartels. There is chaos in the street. That's at the community level. You have the government level in some of those areas like Minneapolis and Iran. But then you look at the national, the international level, and there's chaos there. And, you know, historically, there's not been a world war. There is a world war or a major conflict about every 80 years. And we're fluttering around that right now. And so with what's going on, you know, where are we? And I think what we need to do is just keep faith in the system we have in America. Keep the faith. Say your prayers. We will work through this. We've gone through tough things before, but we will work through this. I'm going to turn that back over to you.
Yeah, well, you mentioned those blue states, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, and we'll get more into detail on that in a minute. But I caught a news piece this morning that I don't really have a lot of details, but apparently there was some protests in Ocala yesterday, and someone got injured in some type of accident there, not like a shooting, but with a car or something like that. I don't know the details. And if they're having protests in Ocala, if you know anything about Ocala, I know you do, Ted, that certainly could happen anywhere.
It sure can. And was that over immigration?
Yes, it had something to do with this day of action or whatever.
Right. Yeah, the day of action. All right. So let's talk about this. What's the common underlying theme? And it's a lack of rule of law, following the laws. You can't have a secure nation, and you can't have a civil society if there's not rule of law, and if there's not enforcement or respect for the rule of law. And we can go up to Minneapolis, or you can go to Ocala here. We've seen it here in Gainesville and some of the other other college towns. And you go back to when the conservative speakers were going in to like San Francisco and these other liberal areas, and they were being run out because they're too conservative. And so we saw this over and over again, and it's the left progressives wanting that conservative voice out. They don't want to be challenged. So if you come down to rule of law and you look what's going on in Minnesota, it's a tragic accident. I'm not going to say an accident. It was a tragic incident for this fellow to get shot and killed. Absolutely tragic. But why was he there protesting? Why were so many people carrying the same signs, out there at the same time in the same area, and they were protesting ICE going after somebody they knew was in this building. And it was organized, so somebody was behind that organization. But then you have to ask, why was there an illegal immigrant that the mayor and the governor of Minnesota would not want to get out to protect their citizens? And one of their citizens got killed because the mayor and the governor would not follow law to protect their citizens over an immigrant. And this was all caused by not following the rule of law. And it goes back to President Biden that led him. The numbers now are 22 million people came in illegally over that 4-year period of time. And so, yeah, you've got to clean up the mess, and it's going to get messy.
Well, the thing about it is when you resist arrest, things are going to happen. Okay, nothing good comes from that. But I think part of the reason why people think they have to resist arrest is some of the rhetoric that's being spewed out there.
Sure.
One of the latest things, and it sounds on the surface is fairly quiet, but it's very subtle. Violent rhetoric. You had Governor Walz. I don't know if you saw this. He literally said that he compared what's happening in Minnesota to Ayn Rand, who is going to be the Nazis and everything else, more Nazi stuff and that type of. So if you truly believe that you're going to be disappeared or taken to a gulag or interrogated and shot by the Gestapo, you would resist arrest. Even if you're a logical person in that moment sometimes, if that's what you truly believe. But resisting arrest of law officers is never going to end well for you, period.
It never will. I was thinking about this on the way in. If you saw somebody robbing a store and you saw the robber getting away and the police showed up and you interfered with the police going after that robber, would you be in trouble?
Absolutely.
All right. So somebody's here illegally. They have warrants on this guy. They want to take him out. So you're stepping in front of the policeman and say, oh, no, you can't do that. What's the difference in that? Why don't we get behind the law enforcement that wants to do what Donald Trump and the Republicans got elected is to clean up this mess. And I think people need to keep in mind where we were and where we were heading under the Biden administration. And we can talk about that later on. But look at what was going on in this country with DEI, wokeism, the whole transgender. And I heard a news article or a news report on the way in how they were comparing these protesters, or not the protesters, but the ICE agents and the parents that are complaining about how bad this is, to the same thing that happened in Virginia with the parents speaking out against the parents speaking out against the school board about the sexual
stuff.
all that garbage, the DEI, wokeism, and all that, and how they're comparing those two. And it was bad over here in Virginia. The media said, oh, that was okay because those were domestic terrorists. They were saying the left was trying to say that the president's saying this, or the Republicans or who's ever in charge is saying this guy was a domestic terrorist. And so they're standing up for him, but they wouldn't stand up for the parents speaking up about the safety of their children.
Yeah, well, one of the things we need a definition of at some point is what is the definition of a peaceful protest? Because mostly peaceful.
Oregon, wasn't it?
Mostly peaceful.
Washington State.
I saw a clip from last night, this morning when I was going through some stuff. They attacked they being these peaceful protesters, attacked another hotel where they suspected that ICE agents were staying, literally crashed the door down and started painting stuff on it, insisted on trying to go in there. And I thought that the guards at the front showed remarkable restraint because if someone were trying to do what they did, trying to get in my house, it wouldn't end well for someone.
I have said that multiple times. I appreciate the law enforcement that's out there. I could not do that job. I know my temper, and I'm thankful they're there. I'm like you. Don't do that at my house.
Well, I want to go through a couple of little news clips here because, as I say, we've got chaos in the streets, and I wonder, Ted, how far do we need to go? This is something Vice President J.D. Vance on Saturday made a pointed statement about engineered chaos in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as leftists riot and protests against U.S. immigration and customs enforcement ICE officers. Engineered chaos. So what do you think about that statement by Vice President Vance that it's engineered chaos?
I think it's absolutely true. I mean, we've seen this. It happened right here in Gainesville when they were protesting the conservative speakers like Candace Owens or Ben Shapiro. Right here at the Target, I got called. I was in office, and they said that a pile of red bricks had been dropped off. Nobody ordered them. They've been dropped off in front of the Target. And this was during George Floyd, and these conservative speakers were coming in, and so the person called me. So how did these bricks get here, and why? And I said, I have no idea. Well, it was paid for by an organization behind that that's fomenting that. When you look at those organizations, Soros is always the one to blame. But what about foreign governments? You know, Iran, China, Russia, Cuba, anybody that doesn't like America doing this. And then you have the anarchists out there that are going to be in this. And to organize people to show up at the same time with the same signs, it tells you how organized this is. And their goal is to destroy this country. And it goes back to Bernie Sanders. You can't keep America the way it is. You've got to tear it down and rebuild it.
Absolutely. Well, you've heard me say this before, Ted, but of course, if I say it, it bears repeating.
Absolutely.
All of this is orchestrated.
Yep.
That's, I think, what Vice President Vance is alluding to. And the definition of orchestrated, at least the one I've looked up, arrange or direct the elements of a situation to produce a desired effect. That is exactly what is happening. All of this is clearly being orchestrated.
It sure is, and it's not the New York Philharmonic Orchestration.
No, it is not. But it is played like a fine-tuned fiddle, that's
it
for
really
sure.
is. I mean, they have a goal, and their goal is to keep bringing this dissent on to destroy the Republican Party, how bad Trump is, these policies, and they will never be happy until they have control of this. Go back again. If Kamala Harris had been in office, how much damage would have been done to this country, and could we ever dig out of that? We would not be the constitutional republic. I mean, it's clear. You wouldn't have these problems. You wouldn't have an overgrown illegal immigrant class in here of 22 million people and all the crimes that go with that.
Well, if she were president, we'd probably have at least another 10 million already across the border in this year.
We would, no doubt about that. And then the fabric of America, the core values and the fundamental principles that have sustained this country for 250 years would be gone. And it would scare me, and I think everybody should be in fear of what would be written for the next generation. Their goal is to be the utopia of Venezuelan socialism.
I hear you.
And that's what AOC was talking about, and all those ignorant people.
Well, people may
try to keep
wonder
us nice.
why, and we've talked about this in depth, but why is ICE there in force?
Exactly.
In force in Minnesota. Pam Bondi was on Fox News, I believe it was, over the weekend, and it was shortly after this gentleman had been shot and killed, unfortunately, in Minneapolis.
Sure is.
And the whole video is about 10 minutes, so I'd encourage people to watch it. We're only going to watch about a minute clip of it here, but she pretty much explains in pretty good detail why there is the ICE presence there. Let's hear from Pam Bondi, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Sure.
Why this has happened in Minneapolis is because you have a mayor, you have a governor who has declared Minneapolis a sanctuary city, saying, bring your worst of the worst to Minneapolis. You're invited here. We will protect you. Aisha, these are the arrests. These are just the arrests that ICE has been making. And that's why Donald Trump has ICE in Minneapolis to protect the citizens. Sodomy of a boy, strong arm robbery, sexual assault, sodomy of a girl under the age of 16, rape, 12-year-old girl, strong arm, rape, ag assault, convicted rape, child fondling. These are all the illegals that Joe Biden was letting into our country. And they were all going to Minneapolis because the mayor, the governor, the AG, they were protecting them. And Donald Trump is going to protect the citizens of our country. I was there all week, as you saw. I was in Minneapolis, and we are going to protect our churches. We are going to protect our great men and women in law enforcement who were out there doing their jobs today. They were out there arresting a violent offender, and then this guy comes up. I can't talk about more of the details. Chief Bovino talked about that. It's now all pending, but we will support the men and women in law enforcement, and we will support the good citizens.
Ted, one of the things I keep hearing from the left as they talk about the ICE agents, and in the case of this particular shooting, Border Patrol not being properly trained and all of that. Here's the thing I say about that. There may be a point there somewhere. But of course, the ICE agents aren't necessarily trained for mob scenes in an urban area, but they're not really supposed to be dealing with that. They're supposed to be able to go in, apprehend a suspect like Miss Bondi was talking about, and take them and deport them or whatever the process is, or go into a jail where local officials have arrested someone, held them for ICE, and take them. They're being put into situations because of the nature of the sanctuary city for something you could argue they're not actually trained for, but that's not their fault.
Good point. I mean, and that's really the bottom line. That is the crux of the story. They're only there because of the liberal policies, and Gainesville has the same. They still have it, the sanctuary city. When she read off all those charges, whether they're convicted or just charged with those, when you read those off, you've got to think, does Governor Walz and Mayor Fry want to protect those people over his citizens?
Yeah, well, the question that I have, and get well soon, Ted.
Yes, sir.
And the question that I have is, at what point is too much, that kind of thing? Because at some point it becomes a diminishing returns. I don't know, but Governor Tim Walz, he says so much, but he has now activated the National Guard in Minneapolis.
Yeah, let's talk about this.
So now you're setting up a situation where you have National Guard troops, which are federal in their nature, potentially going to be at odds with federal officials, local police, all this in there. It's only going to escalate the situation. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is history repeating itself. Go back to Andrew Jackson's tenure when South Carolina was going to cede. South Carolina had their troops. Andrew Jackson went ahead and he armed his troops, and it was almost a stalemate, but they negotiated. Fortunately, they had intelligent leaders down there, and the governor of California, I think it was Jefferson Davis, he backed down and stopped that attack. This is where we're at, and is really, we're in the 21st century in America with everything else going around in the world. Is this where we want to start something? And go back to, what happened. You were talking about how the ICE agents aren't trained to do police work and do all those things that they're being accused not being able to do. Go back to January 6th when that young lady got shot. What was her name? Abigail.
Good.
Yeah, and who shot her? It was a trained police officer. And, these things happen. What has to happen is the temperature needs to come down. Both sides back off a little bit. Let some fresh air get in. There's plenty of cold air up there. And recalculate what you're going to do. If not, Trump can move on that Sedition Act. And if he does that, they're going to call martial law in Minneapolis and around that area, and there'll be curfews. And do we really want to go down this, or can we have rational heads? And if the leaders in Minnesota can't do this, you need new leaders.
Yeah, well, you bring up an interesting point, because President Trump, in a interview with the Wall Street Journal, kind of alluded to potentially de-escalate and backing it down. But here's the thing that I say about that. I believe that, yes, we could de-escalate it. It might be time to back it down. But that would work if you had what you would call legitimate, peaceful protesters.
Right.
Because they would go away. But this organized, orchestrated mob, this, that J.D. Vance was talking about, they're not going to go away because of that. They're going to feel like it's working and invigorated, and you'll see, in my opinion, I hope I'm wrong, but you'll see more of that rather than less.
I think you're absolutely right. And then what would happen if the conservatives that said we've had enough of this, We want our cities under control. If we organize and we went out and protest, what would happen if that were to happen? Is that where this is going? Let's hope not, because most of the conservatives have a job and they couldn't afford to go there and do that. But there will come a point, if this keeps going down and escalating, we'll show up.
I mean, all you got to do to see how orchestrated it is look how some of these so-called protesters, I mean, they've got as much armament on them as the ICE agents have, if not more, with these masks and all that kind of stuff that they're using, the tear gas and everything.
Yeah, and everybody has the same signs.
Yes.
They have all that, the same little whistle that they blow. They know how to blow it, so there's been training. And so I don't know. It just, the left loves to keep that fomented, to keep that anger up, to keep their base ginned up. We just want normalcy back in life, the majority of the people in America that I talk to.
Yeah, well, another question that's come up is a government shutdown. Because let me read you this. Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, who is actually running for governor now,
That's
I do believe.
Klobuchar, but that's
Klobuchar,
okay.
whatever, yeah. She is actually running for governor, apparently, said she won't vote to fund Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is ICE, because they were making America less safe. So they're talking about potentially having another government shutdown because of funding for ICE. So that's what they're willing to put on the line.
Oh, it's a safe thing for her to say, because ICE is funded between, right now with the last bill that passed, they're funded until 28 or 29. So for her to say we're not going to vote for this, not to fund ICE, it's a lie. It's a political BS. It's, for her to say that. And then, let's replace Waltz with Amy Klobuchar. Come on, Minnesota, you're smarter than that. I was born there, was there until I was in the 3rd and a half grade. I know you're better than that.
Absolutely. Well, another question out there is, of course, the midterms. Yep. How's this going to affect the midterms? Well, let me read you another little news snippet here. On Sunday, on CNN State of the Union, Governor Kevin Stitt, I hope I'm saying that right, a Republican from Oklahoma, which is not really a bastion of liberalism, said President Trump is getting bad advice on his immigration policy. So there are some cracks, if you will, within the Republican Party, if you want to define it that way, that are beginning to question some of this. And, once one person does, it's kind of like water coming out of the dam. You got to stick your finger in it or whatever. What are your thoughts about this affecting the midterms? I mean, obviously it's costing human life, but how far is too far? How much is too much?
I don't know. What side is costing more human lives? The illegal people here doing the crimes they're doing? I mean, American citizens do plenty of crimes too, but do we need unnecessary crimes committed? How far will this go? I mean, we'll find out. And John, anytime you have such a massive problem with those 22 million people here illegally that are undocumented, they're spread out throughout the country. Biden was flying them around the country. Whenever you have a mess like that, the cleanup is always messier in the beginning. But if you've got a mission where you're focused, what you're trying to get under control, and again, this goes back to rule of law, civil society, you're going to have people waver because it's uncomfortable. And this is the problem with politicians. Politicians are running to be reelected. I'll check over the break to see if he's up for reelection. They don't want to, if they make a decision, they've got to live by that. So the best thing to do is kind of come out a little bit against the president, but if it turns good and it goes well, they'll say, well, I was always with him. So let's see how this plays off. But I think it's more important to get behind the president and say, yeah, these are tough policies. Maybe we can tweak them, but we're not going to back off on the mission. The mission is get people out of here illegally and get back to normalcy.
Well, something that really doesn't get talked about much, Ted, but this massive wave of illegal immigration that happened under Biden, yes, it's been obvious that it's affected American citizens like the victims, Lake and Riley, all that kind of stuff. But nobody talks about it. It's actually exploitive of the immigrants themselves.
It really is.
Because if you look what happened out there with the Tierra del Agua out there in Colorado, they were taking over apartment complexes and terrorizing illegal immigrants.
They were.
in that kind of, and so it literally, and these people are being exploited for labor and stuff like that, and it's exploiting American workers because they're losing jobs or not getting jobs. The whole situation is very exploitive. So, it's not just one or two victims. The whole thing is causing chaos in the country.
It really
and for
is.
the people that they say they want to help.
Yeah, they want to help. Let me help you. I'm here from the government. It reminds me of my campaign slogan, had enough. The American people have had enough. Let's get this under control. Let's move forward. Let's get the extra expense of having the illegals here that were doing the fraud. You've heard me talk many times about the $22 billion of fraud 3 years ago just in food stamps in America. Then you throw in what's going on in the Somalian community in Minnesota, but that goes around in all communities around the United States. Look at that money that is being spent fraudulently. If we were to save that, how much cheaper would things be in America if we didn't have to have that fraud, if we didn't have to police that fraud and go after that? That's what this is about, and it's time we get this under control. And again, go back to my slogan, had enough. Let's stop it. Let's move forward.
Well, you mentioned the stuff about Somali and the fraud. This popped in my head over the weekend. You never know what might pop in my head. But if you want proof that there was fraud there, let me give you some.
I want it.
Okay.
I'm all yours.
So it centers around daycares, right?
Yeah.
All right. So apparently they've cut the funding to these daycares. They're saying, right? Shut them. Where are the protests of parents that their kids are no longer attending daycare?
Great point.
Have you heard any of that?
I haven't heard one or any starving children from that.
So what is that? Because if there were evidence that massive amounts of kids weren't able to attend daycare, that would be the lead story. Parents out protesting. There's no protesting because guess why? There were no kids in those daycares. That's just obvious.
For one, I'm happy there wasn't because they wanted them in the luring center, not the learning center.
They've been leering at them or whatever. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. I hope you've enjoyed our show so far. Please come back, tune in, share what we're doing, become a sponsor. Check this out. Take us to break, Ted.
Yeah, we really appreciate you tuning in, and we want you to share us with your network if you think we're worthy. I hope we are, and we'll see you after the break.
On April 7th, 2025, Gator Nation reached the mountaintop as Florida won the national championship in basketball. Now, relive every thrilling moment with Franz Beard's new book, The Golden Season, the unforgettable story behind Florida's historic 2025 title run. Feel the passion, the drama, and the glory all over again. Available now at Spurriers.com. Click the shop tab. That's Spurriers.com.
Well, we appreciate Mr. Baird's sponsorship of the show there and of many shows across the network, so to speak.
Absolutely.
If you haven't read anything from Franz Beard, you need to check it out. That book in particular is about the championship run that the Florida Gator men's basketball team had last year, and it is excellent.
That was an exciting game, too, and we appreciate him highlighting that.
Absolutely. Well, back to this kind of ongoing question for today's show. How far do we go? We were talking about domestically. Now let's talk a little bit about another place that is seeing tremendous violence in the streets, and that is the slaughter in Iran. There's new reporting coming out that a 2-day crackdown that says has killed as many as 36,500 Iranians. I'm not saying that's true, but that is what is being reported. The death toll placing it among the deadliest short-term mass killings in modern history. The leader, Ali Khamenei, said he's going to mercilessly crush them nationwide by any means necessary, and he's actually in hiding right now, but they're stuffing victims in body bags, and one surgeon, Ted, described the scene as a nightmare unlike anything he had seen. I mean, what should we do about this if this is in fact true? And it's certain, at a certain level it is true for sure.
You know, it's a tragic thing that's going on there. And, you know, we can look back at Tiananmen Square. The history from China says less than 1,000 people got killed or around 1,000. Reports are over 10,000. This is going to go down. If that was 10,000, this 36,000, it's just totally tragic. This is a government cracking down on the citizens that are protesting for freedom and liberty. Look what's going on in this country. We've got pockets of citizen paid protesters protesting against the government to protect illegal aliens. You know, it just flipped around. People need to get their thinking straight. And it's not just for today, but where we're going to be as a country 5 to 10 years from now. And do you want to be what's going on in these other countries that don't have the protections that we have in this country? And I know people are going to say, oh, we don't have any protections. That guy was carrying a gun legally. You know, we don't know the facts of that. That'll come out, and they need to prosecute him accordingly, however the chips may fall. But these people in Iran, in China, North Korea, these other authoritarian states, they don't have any recourse. The government is the recourse. This country, we have that, but we're going to lose it if people don't stand up to elect the right leaders. The liberal progressives, you do not want it elected, because as they move into socialism, the next step is communism, and this is what you get.
Yeah, well, going back to our original story here, that we've got some choices we've got to make as an American people. Tim.
We do,
and elections, all of that, but we have to decide: are we going to be a country ruled and governed by laws or not?
Yeah,
because
according
when you
to
don't,
Tim Kaine,
that's what you have right there in Iran.
Tim Kaine says your freedom and liberties don't come from God; they come from government. You know, they'll give you as much as they want to give you, and anything government gives you, they can take away.
Well, I was talking to my son over the weekend about this. You know, with laws, you have to enforce the laws that are on the books, or get rid of the laws. Because if you
change them,
you talk about corruption and law enforcement, and I don't know that there's any more corrupt law enforcement. My dad used to say there's no more corrupt police than there are, or politicians than there are corrupt barbers. They just can do more harm to you when they are. But if you allow selective enforcement of the law, that is a recipe for corruption, because then you pick and choose which laws to enforce, which ones to apply to certain people. The thing is, to enforce the laws, if you enforce the laws, then people don't like the laws. They might be motivated to change them, because some of these laws go back, 100 years or more. The thing with like the churches, there's a new law that came out not too long ago about invading, coming into a house of worship that has to do with abortion clinics and all of that. And I'll just say this on that, Ted. I said this on our Friday show.
And that's all I'm going to say.
Check this out. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think I'm right about this. Anytime you've had people invading a house of worship, regardless of what their religion is, they've never been on the right side of history. They
never have been, have they? No. Yeah, I mean, let's look at Alabama or the South when segregation was going through. And, they invaded a lot of those. They're never on the right side. And, let's just hope that we get through this quickly. Maybe that freeze will put everybody in their place and get them to cool down.
Yeah, well, back to this Iran story. What is our obligation and what should we do? Because if you look at what's happening, President Trump said, and he always kind of sticks by what he says, he said that if they just started doing mass killings, he was going to intervene. Well, if this reporting is correct, 36,000 is pretty much a mass killing. Mm-hmm. I know we've moved some naval stuff in that area. We've upgraded some stuff at the various bases. We have a presence over there anyway, and he's already shown what he could do with nuclear. But what is our obligation to a place like Iran, and what should we do, Ted?
That's a great question, and I think people really need to ponder that are listening, share it, and get opinions and report back to us. Are we going to be the policemen of the world? Are we the only country that is poised to go into Iran and protect the Iranian citizens? I say not. Where are all the other liberal democracies around the world? Does this not matter to them just as much? Where are all the displaced Iranian citizens? Does this not matter to them also? So why should it be just American assets? Hopefully no soldiers. And I would prefer not to get involved in this any further, because if we do, it's another Middle East conflict. And how many of those do you want to kind of go back? And it's the definition of insanity. how many times you have to do it to get the same results. You know, the last one we were 20 years into it, trillions of dollars, a lot of lives killed, but a lot more damage that this country will live with for the next 50, 60 years with taking care of our veterans and the broken families. And this needs to be thought out long and well. And isn't this the role of the UN?
Do they have a role? I don't know. Their
Their
role
role is to take money from wealthy nations, and about 10% of that goes where it's supposed to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse me.
What the perplexing thing about this is obviously everything you just said about needing that support from Europe and other free, let alone the Arab countries in that area, is
exactly.
needed. And I think President Trump's vision for the whole area is absolutely correct. People don't tend to want to go to war when they're fat and happy. So if everybody is making money and all that, they don't tend to want to fight. And I believe that vision, if it could be carried out, will be successful, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. In the meantime, you've got this situation where people are being slaughtered. You obviously have a terrorist organization there in Iran that has sponsored terrorism all around the world in that region. And people compare it to where we went into Venezuela. We've said this ad nauseum, that the situation is totally different. So yes, I think President Trump's vision will work, but that doesn't solve the immediate problem. And I don't know what the solution is, because I don't think us putting troops in there is it, but I don't know what it is.
Sun Tzu, 5,000 years ago, Chinese philosopher, general, he said, avoid long drawn out wars. They cost a lot of money and they very rarely have any benefit. And, you look at what's going on over there, who's to benefit from that? Well, Ayatollahs, the Iranian Guard, and then who else? Well, China, right? China gets a large percentage of their oils from Iran. So do you think Iran has something to play here? They want to go in there. If China goes into Iran, it'll be Tiananmen Square. They'll crush people just as like has happened. They'll give the support to the Ayatollah. So that puts us in conflict with Iran, just as we're in conflict with Russia over Ukraine. Why is it us? NATO needs to be dealing with the Ukrainian issue in the Eastern theater. And then all other free nations need to support anybody but China, because if China goes in there, you're going to have another China stronghold.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, Ted. Freedom has never, and I could be wrong. People feel free to chime in on Facebook or wherever and tell me where I'm wrong. But I can't think of one place where freedom has been bestowed to people.
Exactly.
It's always been taken at the point of a spear, the bullet of a gun, or something like that. Even in this country, and people tend to forget this, what happened in the Civil War, you could debate all kinds, but the fact is 500,000 people were killed in the Civil War, period, to get to where we got that all men are created equal, freedom, all of that kind of stuff. To be the country that we had, literally hundreds of thousands of people have died in this nation for freedom and fought all over the world, Americans. So at the end of the day, and I'm not advocating for this, I'm just stating what I think is a fact, it's up to the Iranian people.
It is.
Ultimately. And 36,000 people dead is terrible. I don't want to see another person die. But when you compare it to what the sacrifices we made to get free here, it's pretty small.
It is. The current history on the Revolutionary or the Civil War was close to 700,000 people died. And Iraqi freedom, when we went in there, we went in there for, we went into Afghanistan. Then it was, we have to free Iraq of Saddam Hussein and give the Iraqi people freedom. Like you said, you can't bestow that. It's like this wedding ring. I can give this to you. What's it worth?
Not near as much as it is to you, right?
Right. I mean, this is worth whatever gold is, about $5,000 an ounce now. And, but for me, it's priceless. This is 51 years of being married and knowing Carolyn and all the struggles and that. You couldn't buy this ring from me. Yeah, you chop my finger off. But you can't give something that they don't even understand. And the Iraqi people never knew what freedom and liberty was. They heard about it, and the same in Iran. They know what it is, the people, and it has to come from within and they have to overthrow that government if they want it bad enough. If you want it bad enough, you'll do it.
Yeah, well, Ted, you and I have one thing in particular in common. We both married up.
51 years there, if you're listening, Carolyn.
Yeah, because Carolyn, Ted's a good man, but nothing shows signs of light to Carolyn herself. But
she is a blessed woman.
So here you go, man. Another question real quick here. The leader of the free world, that for a long time now, the president has been referred, I'm not just talking about Donald Trump, the office of president has been referred to as the leader of the free world. So exactly what does that mean? I want to play a little clip here from Barack Obama when he was talking about Libya. And it's pretty interesting. The whole clip is about 10 minutes long. I'd encourage people to watch it. But we're only going to play about a minute or so of it. We'll come back and talk about it.
I think it's a great thing to watch this for you. If you haven't watched it, it refreshes what we don't want.
Absolutely.
But the core principle that has to be upheld here is that when the entire international community, almost unanimously, says that there is a potential humanitarian crisis about to take place, that a leader who has lost his legitimacy decides to turn his military on his own people, that we can't simply stand by with empty words, that we have to take some sort of action. I think it's also important to note that the way that the U.S. took leadership and managed this process ensures international legitimacy and ensures that our partners, members of the international coalition, are bearing the burden of following through on the mission as well. Because, as you know, in the past, there have been times where the United States acted unilaterally or did not have full international support. And as a consequence, typically it was the United States military that ended up bearing the entire burden. Now, last point I'll make on this, could not be prouder of the manner in which the U.S. military has performed.
Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, that speech he made there was kind of where it got coined, leading from behind, that America can play a part in it, but you got to have all these different partners. I don't disagree with that, but I've never really seen, we saw what happened in Libya. Libya is still one of the worst places to be in the planet. It's a bastion of terrorism and all of that kind of stuff.
They have active slavery there where they sell slaves.
So it didn't work for one thing, but his point that we need to be part of coalitions, I think, is right. But I've not seen where America can take a back seat. I wish in a way we could, but I don't see how, getting back to this whole thing with Iran and stuff and leader of the free world, how do we do it without America being the leader? How's the world going to be without American leadership?
Well, we've lost our way. We forgot who we were. And I think we need to go back to the words of the founding fathers. George Washington said, honest and open trade with all nations, entanglement with none. We've missed that. After World War II, we became the superpower, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we were the sole world superpower. But does that mean we're the world's sole police force? I say no, we're not. And Barack Obama was the beginning of the fall of America in my book. It started before that, obviously, but he brought it to the front. The fundamental transformation of America. You've heard me say many times the abomination of America. What's happened to it? It is an abomination. And what he did in Libya was a disaster. They did no-fly zones, took out all of Gaddafi's defenses. ISIS came out of that because he and Hillary Clinton had no clue what they were going to do, and that's what happened here. So yeah, he led from behind, and they even said, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We'll just sit and watch. Well, ISIS happened, and that is where you have to have strong leadership, but you have to have the principles that who we are as Americans. This is what we do. That's why I'm against President Trump bombing those or blowing those drug boats up. As much as I think they deserve that, I think we ought to have a doctrine that says if you bring drugs into our country, it's capital punishment. You can accomplish the same thing and do it publicly, to let people know we're not playing around. And, we have to think this out before we go into Iran, because we know what happens when we go into the Middle East, it hasn't been good for us. And I was in church yesterday, and one of the elders came up to me, and he goes, in Revelations, it talks about the rise of the Persian Empire. And if Iran or Syria falls, Iran will take that over. And so it's going to become the large Persian Empire that brings in the last days. I don't know, I wouldn't, he said I wouldn't buy any green tomatoes. I'm not there yet, but it's something to think about and how we need to lead, who we are as Americans, where we're going, and that's focusing on us here, make our country strong. And, when you're at $38 trillion in debt, when you're broke, you can't do anything.
Absolutely. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Davos and the president literally taking over Davos. And, the whole thing kind of centered around Greenland and then all of that kind of stuff. But I want to play a little clip from President Trump when he was speaking to all these billionaires, as Bernie would say, in Davos. Let's check this out. We'll come back and talk about it.
Which we won. We won it big. Without us, right now, you'd all be speaking German and a little Japanese, perhaps. And then after the war, which we won it big. Without us, right now, you'd all be speaking German and a little Japanese, perhaps. And then after...
Well, Donald Trump, he said something that has been said before. But, of course, when he says it, not only does it get attention, but, of course, it gets piled on about, that he's being insulting and all of that kind of stuff. And what I said on Friday's show, Ted, that you were missed, by the way, but I said that...
Me too. I missed you.
that Donald Trump, to really understand what he's trying to do in America, and I think in Europe as well, is he's trying to wake the woke, so to speak. The American people need to wake up to what's happening before it's too late. But I also think he's actually doing that with European nations as well. I mean, I'm not saying anything about Greenland is not accurate in what Trump says about the need for it and all of that. But I think the reason he's pushing it the way he's pushing it is he's trying to wake up all of Europe. He's not opposed to Europe. He knows that we need a strong ally, Western-style Europe, and he's worried that they're further off the abyss than we are, and he's trying to wake them up. That's just my opinion.
No, and he's got their attention. I mean, he really has, and that's just his style. Yeah, it's crude, crass, whatever you want to call it, but it's effective. I remember when he went after NATO in the beginning when I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee in his first term, how Republicans and Democrats were bashing him, how he's separating us from NATO, he's weakening our country. Well, look at it. That was what, in 2016, 2020. Look at today. Back then, none of those countries were paying what they're supposed to. Today, they went from 2% going to 5% because he called them out on there, and there's threats all around the world. The other thing is he's saying, you guys need to depend on yourself as much as you depend on us, because in the past, everybody said, well, the Americans will take care of it. The Americans, we were taking advantage. And so, yeah, he's going to rub some feathers, or ruffle some feathers, and they needed to be ruffled. And he's got people's attention. And I think, the thing about him, he's going to be blunt, but I think he's going to be very honest. And behind the scenes, his goal is to get NATO to stand up and tighten up and meet your obligations. And that rhetoric he's given to Iran, I would take that very seriously, Iran. We know what the capabilities of this military under the direction of Donald Trump is. And before we go to the next thing, I want to just bring up Governor Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma was elected in 2019. So his 6-year term is coming up. So he may be saying this about bad advice and Trump and putting a little distance from him and Trump because he's up for re-election.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. But, the thing, Ted, about this whole situation, I said about freedom being bestowed, obviously the American people over the centuries have fought for their freedom and the things that you and I cherish and all that. And, of course, what President Trump was referring to about World War II and all, clearly the Americans, with help from allies, saved the free world and kind of created it in many ways. But here's the thing that scares me a bit, Ted. we still, and I've said this many, many times, if we don't man the political ramparts, if we don't get educated, motivated, activated, and man those political ramparts, we're going to have to man the real ones again. And just because we've had freedom, fought for it, our generations have fought for it, doesn't mean it's going to last here.
Right.
And if we don't wake up ourselves, and I think that's what President Trump is trying to do for America and Europe, wake us up that we better start manning the political ramparts, or we're going to have to man them real ones again.
We really will. And I mean, that's not rhetoric, that's factual. I mean, you look at what's going on in the world today. I mean, a good indicator is look at what the price of gold is and what silver is. All-time high. Why is that? Why is it? Because people are uncertain of the future. You know, all these things going on, and you're talking about Greenland. Trump came out, and I think it was a brilliant move. I thought he was pushing too hard. But when you think about it, make a bold statement. We're going to buy Greenland. They don't need it. They can't take care of it. It's got all these assets and, minerals that we can really take advantage of and, give ourselves more security. But he creates that terrible narrative, and everybody pushes back. Now what do you have? You have NATO and everybody come together to make that a stronghold and a first-class missile defense system, because our biggest threats are coming from Russia, North Korea, and China, to where they can shoot missiles over that Arctic Circle. And so, strategically, it was a heck of a move, and I think it's going to make America – I know it'll make America stronger.
Yeah, and really the greatest threat, in all honesty, to Europe is probably not Russia. Even though I agree they're a threat, and that's what NATO is about. The greatest threat right now to Europe is not taking the invasion, whether it's quickly or slowly, from the Middle East and all in there, because all that turmoil in the Middle East, the vast majority of those people have shown that when they get, and I don't blame people from running the heck out of there, but they're going to come into Europe more than here, and they're definitely coming here as well. But the basic Islamification of Europe is probably a long-term greater threat than Russia, in my opinion.
It really is. It's like a cancer that is just a slow-growing one. It doesn't go away, and it's going to have to be dealt with, or it kills the host. This is what's going on. It's very well highlighted in Samuel Huntington's book, The Clash of Civilizations. Read it, because this is going on not just in Europe, it's going on here in America, and it's nothing against the Muslim people. It's going against the radical Muslims that want to have the fatah from the river to the sea, or that kind of mindset that you have to adopt Islam or you're going to pay a high tax or be murdered. And that just doesn't fit in America. And how do you run a country with the U.S. constitutional law in conflict with Sharia law? It doesn't work. People that want to come here and practice Sharia law in the United States of America, you've chosen the wrong country.
Yeah, well, I want to play one more video as we're getting ready to close out the show, because you want to know what's at stake. I don't think anyone has ever said it any better than none other than Mr. Ronald Reagan. Now, this is an excerpt from a speech he gave, I believe, when he was governor out in California before he became president. But check this out, because I think he says it pretty clearly.
Talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee,
I think that pretty well says it, Ted, that, we are lucky. He was lucky in Cuba because they had some place to go in the United States. If the United States falls, I think freedom around the world goes out like that candle in the wind. Myself.
It really does. I get people ask me, and they get mad about America with all the mess that's going on here with the riots and things like that, the price of things. And they said, it's a lot cheaper to live in Mexico. It's a lot cheaper to live in Portugal. And I said, are you kidding? I said, you need to stay here and make America stronger. Get involved in politics. Get involved with preserving what we have in this country. Because if you lose in America, if this country fails, there is no safe bastion. It'll be the Ayatollahs. It'll be the Xi Jinpings. It'll be not Castro, but somebody like him, or Maduro, somebody worse than him. That's what's on the stage. If we do not get this country back on track the way it's going to, and on that point, President Trump's trade policies, people are saying how the cost of everything is up, and that's the market's not, or the jobs market's not as good as they tout. On the way in, Buick is coming back from China. They're closing their plants, coming to America, I think Kansas, and so are the Buick in Mexico is coming back to America to build cars here, American manufacturing jobs. And the reason they're doing that, John, guess what? Is the tariffs.
Yes.
He put tariffs on there, and these companies say, you know what, our cars, we can build them cheaper in America and sell them cheaper. So, this is making America stronger. And people are uncomfortable, but this is the process we've got to go through because of the disaster that started under Obama with the fundamental transformation of America. We're back on track, and this is where the election's coming up. People are going to have, Trump's a little off base, or he's a little crude, or these ICE raids are out of hand. Think of it, if he wasn't in office, where this country would be.
Absolutely.
Stay strong.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please like what we're doing, share what we're doing far and wide, support our sponsors. If you'd like to become a sponsor, you just saw that tagline up there. It says, contact Freddie. Make that call. We need your help. Take us out, Ted.
No, we really do. We'd love to have your help so we can get farther and wider in our reach, and we want you to share us with your network. And you asked me about the property tax issue, John. My property tax editorial got printed in the Times-Union, Jacksonville Times-Union. I encourage people to read it. It'll be up on the website. And it's an issue that's coming up on the November 26th ballot here in Florida, or the November ballot this year, about getting rid of all property tax for homestead property tax. Sounds great on the surface, but you need to think what happens if you get a 9/11, the economic downturn of 2008, or another COVID. The economy tanked, and that the Florida tax collectors run short of money. Who are they going to turn to? It's going to be you and I, and property taxes will go back up, or God forbid they put in a state income tax. We've been blessed in this country that we or in this state that we haven't, and we don't want it. So read that editorial, and love to have your feedback.
Absolutely.
Back to you, John.
Peace out, everybody.
Take care. God bless.